The Revolutionary War was a fight for freedom from the Crown of Great Britain, which at the time was the biggest military in the world.
Women stepped up to nurse and launder. This was paving the way for them to officially join our modern military. This enduring spirit was forged at these cold, desperate camps. There, despite the freezing cold and critical reaction of the men around them, women raised children and performed vital camp duties.
The Revolutionary War was hard on all the people in the colonies, but especially people in the camp.
Yeah, I always like history. I just don't like being in the cold for it.
The winter of 1775 was one of the hardest winters due to the lack of soldiers' training, the lack of communication and connection in the 13 colonies, and the inexperience of George Washington's army.
While women's presence at Valley Forge is rarely highlighted, they play a unique and vital role in this iconic revolutionary site. Their contributions paved the way for the future, ultimately proving that women were essential to the revolution and opening the door for their inclusion in the armed forces today. The more military, terrain reasons they chose Valley Forge.
Yeah, that's a really awesome question. So if you go just up the road a little bit here at Valley Forge from where we are currently, you're standing on top of a hill. And what you can see from this hill is you can see all of King of Prussia, and beyond the southern tree line is Philadelphia, where the British are. So you're 20 miles away from Philadelphia, which is a day's march. Every single tree within a 3 to 5 mile radius is cut down. So if you were to see a British soldier wearing their bright red uniform coat, you would be able to see them from miles and miles away. The British learned very, very quickly from the Battle of Bunker Hill in 1775 why you do not charge an uphill battle, literally.
We wanted to know more about family life at Valley Forge.
Yeah, most of the interactions were pretty civil. There are still, within camp, there's still going to be some quarrels here and there between some of the other soldiers. There is one instance that I bring up of a soldier getting a little too intoxicated, and his wife comes out and tries to escort him back into the hut, and she says some very slew words to an officer.
Camp followers were married women and children who would work behind the scenes in all of the camps to keep the soldiers alive and in training.
Yeah, a lot of their daily jobs would look like possibly cooking for their one hut or cooking for a company, a lot of laundry, sewing, cleaning, doing chore work for the soldiers while they're out drilling. Also had folks who didn't know how to use a latrine properly. You had folks who didn't know how to cook properly. And they're doing what's most convenient despite what Washington is telling them in their general orders. So you're doing a lot of things with your hands. So don't think of cooking as tossing something into a microwave and then calling it good, or throwing something into a washing machine and calling it good. They're really using and working a lot with their hands. And some of the officers' wives came and joined to help boost morale. So Martha Washington was able to host and entertain a lot of the wives down at Washington's headquarters while everybody is trying to figure out how to solve the problems.
What did the daily rations look like for both the men and women?
Yes, so the daily rations kind of were supposed to look like, but not all of the time, they were supposed to look like either a pound of beef or pork. They were also supposed to get a pound of bread. They were also supposed to get butter from time to time, salt maybe, and that was if they were lucky, some peas, beans as well, but they're not getting that all of the time.
Cooking looked very simple, and food got scarce at the end of the war. The army would take flour and water and make a fire cake.
A very sad pancake. It is flour and water. And salt if you were lucky, and that was if you were lucky. And there are some stories where soldiers are asking women to mend their clothes or do laundry for them, and the women are charging too much, so that riles up the soldiers and makes them angry, because how dare you charge $7 to do laundry.
A few women would go to be nurses, since the army would need as many as possible. A lot of nursing in the Revolutionary War was just repeatedly bandaging wounds and healing sickness that would spread through camp.
There's even stories of some of the women kind of resenting being nurses because they know how dangerous that job is, especially with the smallpox disease going around.
Having the women and their families at Valley Forge reminded the soldiers why it was so important to fight for their freedom in their country.
Yeah, I think having their wives and their children here and kind of seeing that cause of I'm here to not only fight for my country, but also fight for a better future for my family and for my children, because the wives of the soldiers often had nowhere else to go because they had no one else to take them in. So it's really, well, if I want to see my wife or my child at the end of the day, I really have to fight for this cause, so that way we can have money and we can have land and a future promise of a better United States.
We also wondered about the men's reaction to the camp followers.
There is one poem from a surgeon named Albedich Waldo. He says, quote, "What though they are rags and crape, some being here in female shape, in whom may still be found some traces of former beauty in their faces, yet now so far from being nice, they boast of every bare-faced vice. Shame to their sex, 'tis not in these, one or beholds these charms that please." So a lot of, especially higher up men, are talking about how ugly they are. They're talking about how disgusting they look. They're talking about some of the language that they use that's considered improper. We might not consider it improper today, but they did so back then. They're talking about how they overcharge and how they're not nice. Couple things like that. Just a lot of things that we look at today in the 21st century as like, well, why would you say that? But for the 1800s, that's what they were talking about, and that's how they viewed women.
Children were very overlooked as camp followers, but most of them would do the daily chores that their mothers would assign them.
You did see a lot of soldiers not really talk about children for the most part. A lot of instances that we have here at Valley Forge, we didn't even know there were children until somebody talked about it offhandedly in a letter. Even down at headquarters, we didn't even know a baby existed in headquarters until we found a baptismal record.
Women were essential in the revolution, sparking a legacy that would eventually reform how we sustained our forces during the Civil War and beyond.
There wouldn't even be women a part of the army today if it weren't for the camp followers of the Continental Army. Washington even mentioned in a couple of his letters that they were hardworking women and that we needed these women in our army to be able to recruit as nurses, to be able to recruit as cooks, and be able to recruit as laundresses and tailors, because if it weren't for the women and children of this army, there probably would be no United States today. There wouldn't even be women a part of the army today if it weren't for the camp followers of the Continental Army.
Since history so often forgets these camp followers, we want to remember their sacrifice and recognize their essential role in the revolution that made our country free.